Hey, this is Neil Monins with my sales day here with Michael Hess. We're going to go through some questions that we've received in the last couple of weeks from subscribers, and then we're going to try to make this a regular thing. We're going to offer up a question and answer for Michael, kind of put him in the hot seat. So, Michael, talk.
Well, I am excited to do this, Neil, but most importantly, welcome to you as a face behind the name to the My Sales Day community. Neil is a managing partner with My Sales Day, and I'm excited that my partner here is part of some of our content creation. So he will be handling the questions. I have not seen these questions. The idea, Neil tells me, is not necessarily to stump me, but definitely because I always talk about role play and practice, these types of exercises are important for you to do. So you should be practicing with your partners, and we'll see if your brain fires as fast as mine. And Lord help me if I stumble, but I'm going to do my best. So Neil has got the questions. And by the way, if anybody has any questions you want to send us for the next time we do this, send them to salesquestions@mysalesday.io. Once again, salesquestions@mysalesday.io. Your questions don't necessarily have to be tied to any posts that you read in the newsletter, but they could be. All right, I'm buying time there, Neil, just to calm my nerves because I'm nervous.
Okay. All right. First one's JP from Florida. How do I handle price objections without discounting?
The old price issue. Well, first of all, we never discount until we find out if the buyer really appreciates our value. And the only way that we can do that is to test the buyer and to qualify whether they really understand what they're buying and what it is that they are getting. Price discounts should be the very last step. And remember, in most negotiations, sometimes buyers are asking for price changes just for the sport of it. On the flip side, there are some buyers who have done a lot of Excel spreadsheet work, and they know the range that you are supposed to be in based on their parameters. So it's very important to be a detective and to probe and to qualify the buyer and find out things like, how are you making your determination about evaluating my offering? How is it comparing? And what's the justification to asking for a price reduction? Now, Neil, you were a buyer for a long, long time, and it doesn't matter what you were buying because a lot of our subscribers and listeners here come from a lot of different disciplines. But from the buying perspective, tell me, when price is an issue here, is it sport most of the time? Or was it truly you had a range that you had to negotiate against and you were just basically telling the seller where that range was?
Well, the range usually came from all the competitors that I was looking at. And yes, I'm always after the lowest cost because then you can just buy more. My strategy was always coming with, because I dealt with mostly large companies, and Microsoft was the largest client I ever had with a $35 million budget way back when, before we started our business. Back in 96, that was kind of like the big one.
If you date me again, I will not do these hot seats.
So, but what that challenge was, I had the price in mind, and the idea was just to get a budget in mind, and I would tell the seller what the budget was for their offering, and usually 50% of what the dollars I had for their offering.
Yeah.
In that competitive set. But then my strategy was always say, okay, what if I had an extra 100,000, and then I knew the salesperson would be able to really go back and get a lot lower price, and that
Well,
would really lock it in.
you just played your hand that I think is very important for a lot of sellers to see right here. Oftentimes, it's not about the price as much as it is about what the value that you have to demonstrate for that buyer. But I think the seller, what the common thing that sellers don't do enough is they don't probe against the buyer and they don't find out, what do you care about most in my offering? And this is the important point. Then we'll move on to the next question because we're trying to practice brevity and clarity here. The most important point here is, if you do get into a position as a seller where you have to reduce your price, then you should reduce the things that you're offering that buyer. Take them off the table. Many of the offerings that are being sold these days have numerous levels. You're offering feature number A, feature or letter A, feature B, feature C, feature D. If someone's going to take the price down or even the amount of the expenditure that they're spending with you, they don't get as much as if they would pay top dollar. That's just 101 to go.
True, and it depends on what those offerings are and how much I value those offerings too. But again, if I'm giving you more dollars, then I expect a lot better
No doubt.
price tag.
And more value too, exponentially more value.
Yeah.
We can't go on just yet because I remembered something that's even more important still, practicing brevity and clarity. And that is one of the dangers that most sellers fall into is they try to have this type of negotiation, if you will, this discussion through email, and that will not work. These discussions that we're talking about, these recommendations, have to be one-on-one with the buyer to really get down and dirty, which means you have to sell the buyer on engaging with you either over the Zoom or over the phone to really talk about it.
True, but if I don't have time, I'll do some over email, but then I'll wait for that phone call because I don't want to do an outbound call that gives me less strength. But if you're calling me, I've got more strength because I'm going to say, yeah, you're not on the plan, you're too expensive, you didn't have the offering. But most likely, if I'm starting to negotiate with you, you have a very good chance of getting on that buy.
Very true, and I'm glad you bring that up. I'm not sure the seller should think about leverage at that point because most sellers who are listening to this, they're worried just to get exposure to the buyer and have that conversation. Unfortunately, today, most negotiations and most of these threads on this question happen via email, and that's the worst leverage a seller can have. So the seller has to really fight to get you on the phone, the buyer, and say, come on, we got to talk about this. We're so close to doing a deal. I want to make sure that I understand everything that you care about, and I also have some things that I might be able to sweeten the deal with from a value perspective. That's a little bait. That gets you thinking like, wow, there's something maybe that they've been holding back on. I want to hear this.
So it can't be too late in the process because a lot of times I have the media plan that I used to do in my job of advertising. That's already been bought off by the client. Now I'm just trying to get some extra juice from the orange or the whatever.
Good point, which is interesting that what you're bringing up is that some buyers are negotiating after the fact when all their contract obligations have been at base minimum established. Now it's a game for you. Now it's turned into a game, a sport.
Yeah.
Good one.
Let's practice brevity here. Okay.
We didn't do a good job, but I think
I know.
We opened some good threads.
Yeah. I've got much more to say on that subject, so we'll talk about it another time. Okay. All right, so another one, Chuck from Detroit. How do I stay disciplined when my pipeline is light? Disciplined when his pipeline is light.
Oh, Chuck from Detroit. That's a softball across the middle. Everybody say with me what I'm going to say to Chuck. You wake up an hour early and you get on the phones and the email and you start to pound it. So much about sales is pounding and grit and perseverance. So to Chuck out there, and I'm not going to make an assumption that Chuck is an experienced or inexperienced seller, 1 to 3 years, somewhere in that time frame. I'm just going to assume that Chuck is going through a hard time, and then I'm going to express some empathy right now and say, sales is hard, people. Sales is hard. Okay, it's not supposed to be easy. You get some big salaries, some big commissions, the chance for glory. Sales is hard. Suck it up. So I would say there's a few things that can tangibly help Chuck. Number one, you got to find a mentor in the business, and oftentimes the mentor is not your manager. Let's assume you've got a mentor out there who can help pump you up and give you specific ideas on what that means to inspire yourself and to stay motivated. Number two, your manager has to be part of this conversation. Okay? Your manager has to own some of this slump, if you will, or this motivation issue with you. Number three, your peer sellers in the company. They're going through exactly what you're going through. Misery loves company, but it also breeds good ideas and good inspiration. And with those folks, I think you can get together and you can say, hey, let's start to test each other. Let's have a game today. It's Tuesday morning, it's 8 a.m. Let's check back with each other at 5 p.m. How many appointments did we get? And let's just burn. and maybe put a 20 spot on the line to have some fun with it. Anything and everything you can do to get other people to help you and engage, but also you got to get up a little extra hour early.
All right, second to last question or so. I think we'll do this third question. Bedford from Los Angeles. What should I do when the procurement stalls the deal?
Do we really have a subscriber named Bedford?
Yes.
Okay. But I do want to point out this is for anybody. You don't have to be a subscriber to My Sales Day. By the way, if you're not subscribing to My Sales Day, go to mysalesday.io and you're going to get a lot of these particular skills on a weekly basis. We publish every day. It's a 90-second read. Get off your butt. Go to mysalesday.io. I forgot the question.
What should I do when procurement stalls the deal?
Well, when procurement stalls the deal, you got to get your champion back on the line inside the company, assuming your champion is not part of procurement. But you got to get your champion engaged, which gets back to Sales 101. If you don't have a champion developed on a key account, then you're behind the eight ball, especially if you're selling SaaS or some enterprise big ticket items where procurement does get involved or legal is involved. You need a champion, and you got to get that champion on the line or out at a Starbucks or at the pub and say, what can you do? Here's where we are. Because oftentimes your champion doesn't know what stage you're in the funnel or the progression with the actual procurement team. And you got to get their best practices and tips on what they can do, either personally or tips for places you can go in the organization. That's your best bet.
Okay. So in the last 7 days, last week, what was your favorite post that you wrote in My Sales Day newsletter?
Okay, you did warn me we were going to do these. So I came prepared, obviously, because it makes sense. And just to share with everybody, the reason we're doing this is because I'm limited daily writing these posts to make it a 90-second read. If I am that aggressive in your life, asking for you to engage daily, which I need to be because sales is hard and everybody has to think about their skills on a daily basis. And so that's why we're kind of doing this, to expand a little bit on what I liked. The reason I'm going to pick the February 10 post, and I'm happy to send this out to anybody who's not a subscriber, just email me, michael@mysalesday.io, and I'll send you this post. But what it talks about is what urgency really means in sales. And the sobering truth for most sellers is urgency does not mean the speed at which you reply to a buyer's email. That's not what it means. That's still selling out of your inbox, and that's not being proactive. It's not being strategic. So in that post on February 10th, I'm trying to get between the ears on the seller to get him to consider that urgency means proactive strategic moves to anticipate what the buyer is looking for, which ultimately means you got to do a lot of research. You got to go to Claude or Chat or whoever your de facto AI is, and you got to know more about that piece of business than the marketing people, than the procurement people, than the strategy people. And you really have to be a solution provider. And you have to start coming with POVs and proactively develop some solutions to put in front of the buyer and say, is it this or does it look like this? And give them the eye test thing. So I'm going to say my favorite post was urgency on 210. What did I call the title? It was Master Urgency Without Reacting. And I really like that title. I worked a lot on that because, again, operating with urgency and a high sense of urgency is not reactionary. It's being proactive. I stand by it, and thank you for asking.
All right, there you go. Thanks for participating.
Thank you. Send your questions to salesquestions@mysalesday.io. Good job, Neil Monans. High five.